If you've ever looked at a deal and wondered to yourself, is this a good deal, and had no idea, then this is the episode for you.
We've both been there. Early on, we were like most agents. We were looking at a house, thinking if it felt right, and hoping for the best. That's not a strategy. That's more like a guess.
And today we're going to fix that. Nico is going to go ahead and show you exactly how he analyzes a fix and flip deal with a free tool live on the screen with real numbers and a real property. And then I'm going to do the same thing with a buy and hold rental using a different app. Both of them are free.
We're going to show you 2 rule of thumbs that you can do real easily. Look at a deal in less than 2 minutes before you even pull out a calculator.
And I know it may seem like it, but we're not doing any complicated formulas, no finance degrees required, just a simple, repeatable process that tells you whether a property is worth it or not.
And by the end of the episode, you'll know exactly what a deal looks like with confidence, whether to move forward or to take a step back.
All right, let's get on to it.
So Anna, can you share like a real life experience, maybe when you were earlier in your agent career, of what it looked like when you were trying to examine a deal and how it made you feel?
So when I was first getting into real estate investing as an agent, probably the first time that I looked at a no kidding deal was when I sat through my very first cash flow breakfast club. That's the real estate meetup that Nico and I have both been to. And one of the things they have us do is an exercise to analyze a deal. They're like, here's the basics. Here's 15 minutes, get in groups, go figure it out. Give me a good deal. And I was like, I have no idea what 99% of this means. This is not on my agent exam. They don't teach you this in school for like being an agent. And so I was pretty nervous because it was overwhelming. Like we have a slide, Nico knows this. We have a slide in our meetup decks that we do in person. That's literally a little girl with a fire hose in her face, like
That was
water
you.
blasting her in the face. That was me. That was probably you too.
That was definitely me. Similar, Anna. Like as soon as I sat into one of those meetups, I was in the back. I was like, what is going on? Trying to understand whether this was a good deal or not. And they make us do it by hand. So there wasn't any calculators or anything like that. So I was definitely overwhelmed. Like you said, we didn't learn about deal making in our licensing exam, but it was really cool because, it intrigued me. I got into real estate looking to buy real estate and not just to help people buy and sell themselves. And it really got me intrigued. So that's kind of why we started investing ourselves, what started our podcast. We're going to be talking about today, what makes a good deal. And in your opinion, why do most agents freeze up when, somebody asks, is this a good deal or is it, what's actually going on here?
I think it's a lot of it is inexperience as an agent, especially when you're dealing with an investor. Like, it's like, what does that mean? Like, what is it? What is a good deal to you? I think we've learned this as investors and as agents when someone calls us and was like, I just want a good deal. Well, it's like, okay, well, what does a good deal mean to you? Like a good deal for one person, maybe a great fix and flip, someone else, maybe a buy and hold. And like when you're first learning all these terms and what that means, like you don't even know how to start asking questions. So I would say, I think a lot of agents, when they're first starting out, especially if they start working with investors and someone's asking them if it's a good deal, they freeze because one, they have no idea how to even analyze if it's a good deal. But even before that, I don't think they know like what questions to even ask to be able to like go in the right direction of figuring out, oh, which calculator should I use to analyze this? Because I have no idea what this person wants. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, there's so many different ways to invest in real estate, right? And when somebody says they're a real estate investor, are they a fix and flip? Are they a buy and hold? Are they a short-term operator? So when somebody comes up to you and says they're looking for a good deal, what is your buy box? Are you looking for homes that are barely standing with, a blue tarp and you're looking to fix it up and make it renovated and nice to resell for a profit? Are you a long-term investor? Are you looking to buy properties that are in a nice neighborhood and hoping 10, 15, 20 years that the equity is going to build up and you're going to have a good margin of equity? So I guess most agents don't really understand it, right? I mean, I'll talk about myself. I didn't really understand all that before I got in real estate. So understanding that, getting familiar, we talked about the local meetups, but getting familiar with the jargon. We're going to talk about a few different acronyms and things like that when you're doing some deal analysis. But I think that's what really gives some agents pause. I know agents that are like, I don't want to work with investors strictly for that reason. They just think, oh, they're just here to lowball clients and things like that. And, not every investor works that way. Some people maybe in the fix and flip and wholesalers are doing that, but there's so many different ways that you can buy. So I think that pause just comes from like lack of understanding, right?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Even when people come in lowball, like, I mean, we probably heard from some of our mentors, what is it if the offer isn't, if it's not offensive, it's not low enough. And
Mhm.
it's not really about trying to lowball or like scam someone. It really is like an investor, a seasoned and experienced investor is going to run their numbers, figure out what it's going to cost, what their profit margins are, put in some buffer for risk, and then they're going to come up with a number. So usually, real estate investing is not emotional. It's not like buying your first home where there's an emotional like excitement and attachment to it. They're looking black and white numbers. And I will say, as much as it seems like investors are trying to lowball you or try to force you to lowball an offer, there's logic behind it. There's math behind it. It's like, these are the numbers that I need to make this deal work so that everybody wins all around. So I think that's like an important point to.
And I think I talked about this in a previous episode, but for the agents that are listening, and if you are working with an investor that is, you're putting an offer below asking, sometimes well below asking price, if you go through what we're about to go through, your numbers, desired profit, the holding costs, construction costs, and explain why your offer is the way it is, in my opinion, you get some better feedback from the other side. And they might not accept it, right? But they kind of understand where you're coming from rather than just shooting out offers in the dark. I know other people that do that as well, but
Well,
it kind of just puts numbers to, black and white numbers for the seller to understand, because the job as agents, as investors, is to essentially help someone. So if it makes sense for somebody to buy at a lower price because the home isn't ready for the market, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that need to go into repairing the property. Well, then, an investor is ideal for that. And that's where somebody like that could come in.
Yep. 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 Okay. All right, Nico, before we jump into your calculator, because we are going to use some calculators. So you guys that are listening are lucky because I think when we first started, I mean, there were probably calculators around, but they were telling us to use like pen, paper, and spreadsheets. Now there's like actual pretty good calculators that we can use to kind of figure out the numbers for these deals. But before we jump into the calculator that you use, can you tell us about the 75% rule and why it's the first thing that someone like you might be checking when you're looking at a potential flip?
Yeah. So the 75%, sometimes it's interchangeable with the 70% rule, is a rule of thumb, right? So as we all know, the best deals don't last long, right? So it's kind of, I think Chad Carson calls it back of the envelope math, right? So when you're looking at a property, the 75% rule is based off of ARV. So you're going to hear this term quite a bit, and it's ARV stands for after repair value. So what the home will be worth after it's fixed up. And this is very common in remodel projects, homes that need a good amount of work. You basically reverse engineer from the ARV. So it's a very important number. And I'll go over a little bit more of how that's calculated when I show you this example. But you're going to use that number and then subtract the rehab costs. So I'm going to use simple numbers. So if a home is worth 100,000 after ARV, and it needs $10,000 worth of work. So you take that $100,000, you take 75% of it, which is $75,000. You subtract the 10K worth of work, and your maximum allowable offer is $65,000. So it's a rule of thumb. It's there to kind of like, somebody's telling me that I want to sell this property for $50,000, and that ARV is $100,000. The back of your head, the little light bulb should be going off saying, okay, I think this is a good deal. It's a rule of thumb. It's not like, don't take it by Bible, but it's there to say, okay, this could be a good deal. Let me look into it a little bit more. Let me go my calculator. Some people are able to get it under contract and at that 75% rule. And as long as it makes sense, then you can use that.
Yeah. And I was going to say, if the listeners, our plan is to go do episodes down the road where we dive in a little deeper into what analyzing a property may like, what look like when we get into the nitty-gritty details. Today it's going to be a high level. Check out these tools. We want to show you what we're using them for so you can start playing with them. So this is like spreadsheets, or not spreadsheets, investing deal analyzers 101, but we'll jump into more details in future episodes. So make sure you
For
follow the
sure.
channel.
For
Red the
sure.
likes, what do we say? Subscribe,
Like, share,
like,
subscribe. No, but and it's true. It's kind of unfair for us to make an episode, in an hour to explain all deal analysis. So we're going to give like 2 examples of what it looks like, but obviously you're going to need to go a little thorough. Maybe we'll make some other episodes in the future of like what it looks specifically for a fix and flip versus, a rental versus a BRRRR versus a short-term rental. But for this episode, we're just going to give you 2 examples of what that would look like.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's get into it. So, Nico, can you walk us through a real deal that you've got pulled up using the Bigger Pockets calculator? Tell us what that is, what numbers go in, what you're looking for, what makes a good deal, what would make you walk away. Like, let's get into it. Let's show them what you got.
Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen, right? All right. So before I actually show you properties, I want to explain like where you even find these properties, right? So I'm going to be talking specifically about fix and flips, remodel projects. And I think we talked about this plenty of times. You can find them online, whether you're searching Zillow, Redfin. You can work with an investor-friendly agent like Anna and I, who have access to the MLS, which is, I'm going to show you one that's on the MLS today. You can also do driving for dollars. You can door knock when you see homes that are ugly, essentially write them on a list and maybe cold call them. There's so many different ways, right? So for this example, I'm just going to show you a property that's been on the market for a long time. I always say any property that's over 30, 60 days on the market is essentially a stale listing. So for this example, I'm going to show you a stale listing here in my market, and it's in Hyattsville. And there's numerous reasons why homes can be stale on the market, whether it's price point, whether the home needs a lot of work, or the home is just not accessible. Sometimes there's tenants and things like that make it not accessible. But for this specific property, I wanted to show you. So this is a single family home here in Hyattsville in my market. I'll briefly show you some pictures. It doesn't look like it's in terrible shape. A lot of stuff in there. Kitchen's in decent shape. The cabinets are in decent shape, but maybe the bathroom, some doors.
You don't want to keep the wallpaper?
The wallpaper, a lot
and the blue tile.
A lot of these older homes, they all have wallpaper. I don't know. I guess that was a thing in the 70s and 80s and 60s when these homes were built.
Slap some paper on there and some wood paneling.
Yes, wood paneling. As you can see, there's
The
a
drop
hole in one of
ceiling.
the ceilings. Yep. So I won't go into 2, but it's important for you to understand. Obviously, I encourage you to tour these properties before you actually write offers, but this kind of gives you an idea of the property, what needs to be done. I know Anna and I were just talking about this off camera. One of the biggest hurdles that hold people back is estimating rehab cost, right? I have a little bit of experience. I have a family member. My dad is a contractor, so I've been walking these properties for almost 10 years now, so I can kind of have an idea, but every market's a little bit different. I encourage you to get a relationship with a contractor that can help you do rehab costs and give you a good, accurate quote. So that is definitely just pro tip in our opinion. And then one thing that I did want to show you, it's been on the market 200 days, right? So they are looking to sell. It's just been on the market for a while. So I'm going to share another tab, and I won't go too deep into this, but this is when I talked about ARV, after repair value. This is how you're going to calculate what it's going to be worth, right? After it's repaired. So long story short, I put a little map around that area, detached homes, kind of similar bedroom, bathroom count. And I came up with these. And you want to look at homes within the last 3 to 6 months sold, not homes that are on the market, homes that have recently sold, because that's going to give you the actual value. I came to this one was probably not that one. There was another one, 365, which was probably the best comp right here. Needed a little bit of work. Similar style as that home. So my ARV was I put 375. So now I'm going to switch over to this bigger Bigger Pockets Conference, Bigger Pockets Calculator. Wow, that's a mouthful. All right. And I'm going to try and do this really quick, okay? Because I know we have time. So this calculator helps you analyze and helps you calculate your maximal allowable offer, right? So the listing price, what is it? What does Henry Washington say? The listing price is between the seller and Jesus, right? So they can put it up for 500,000, but that's not what we're going to be looking for. Us as agents, us as investors, we're going to look at it and write an offer that makes sense for us, right? So the first thing you do is put the address in. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to put the after repair value. Now, if you're not an agent, you can work with an agent to get this value. You can also try and do it yourself. Look on Zillow to homes that have recently sold. And especially if it's a flip, you can try and get a more accurate number. So I always try and do a little conservative. I put 370. It could possibly go up to the 400,000 depending on what we do.
Yes. I will caution you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you're using Zillow, don't use Zestimate.
Do not use the Zestimate. That is, we can go down a rabbit hole with that one. But
yes, that is not the most accurate thing to do. So it is best to try to find sold. Because I know some people might type in the address of the property you're thinking of fixing and flipping and be like, what's the estimate for it?
100%.
A word of caution. Sorry, continue.
No worries. So desired profit. So this is going to be dependent on you as the investor, or if you're representing an investor, how much do you want to make on this flip? So for me, anything under 50,000, it doesn't make sense. So it depends on your investor, how much they want to make, right? So purchasing costs. So what are the costs associated with buying a property? There's transfer recordation taxes, there's title fees, there's fees that not a lot of people know unless they're actually buying property. So that can be anywhere. I always estimate 1.5% of the purchase price. So I have a great relationship with a title attorney, so he gives me some discounts, but 1 to 2%, 1.5% is a good rule of thumb. Repair costs. So again, I'm going to talk about this one. This is what holds a lot of people up. I put 75,000 and I always put a little bit extra, like a 10% extra. Just based because if you're doing rehabs long enough, there's always going to be unexpected costs, right? And so I put 75,000. If you have no idea how much rehab costs are, I encourage you to check out this book. It's called Estimating Rehab Costs by Jay Scott from The Bigger Pockets. It gives you a great breakdown of estimating repair costs. Again, we'll go over, when we do another detailed analysis, we'll go over what that looks like, and we can go dive a little bit deeper.
That's a whole episode by itself.
Yep. Holding costs. So a lot of times when you're doing these rehab projects, there's going to be holding costs, electricity, gas, everything all the costs that incurs for how long you've held the property, right? There's also, if you're using hard money or private money like myself, there's going to be interest that you're going to be paying monthly. So I put $2,000. That's really going to be dependent on what strategy you use, whether you buy the property yourself all cash and you don't have much holding costs, or if you're using a partner like a private money lender or a hard money lender, this can go even higher. So something to factor in, right? How long will it take you to rehab and sell the property? So flip like this, it doesn't look like it would take more than three months to, rehab, but I always put at least 2 to 3 months more than that just to be safe, right? Because you can go to the market and Anna can vouch for this. You can buy a property in the summertime, it rehabs, it takes 4 or 5 months. You go back on the market in the wintertime and it takes another 2 to 3 months to sell. So just factoring that time of year is also important. We're recording this in April. A rehab, if it took 3 months, you're getting towards closer to the fall. So those are things to factor. So it's rehab and resell. So factor that in. I put 6 months. Sale cost. How much does it cost to resell the property, right? If you're flipping the property, you're going to have to get an agent. Unless you're Anna and I, you can represent yourself as a flipper, but if you're not, you're going to have to pay agent commissions. Now, that is obviously negotiable. Standard is anywhere from 5 to 7%, and that includes your listing agent as well as the buyer's agent fee. So that's a fee that you have to factor in. And then again, once you're reselling it, there's transfer, recordation, title costs that will have to be in play. So once you have all that, you're going to do update analysis, and it's going to give you your maximum allowable offer, $203,000, a little bit off of the asking price, right, Anna?
Yep. Just a
So
little bit.
I think they were asking 330. So this kind of breaks down, your rehab costs, and you can adjust it accordingly. But I really like this, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I know we're close on time, but this kind of gives you a bigger picture. You can share it. You can even, make this a PDF. So when you send your offer to a client or to a listing agent, you can say, hey, this is how we calculated it. They might argue, hey, rehab cost is only 30,000 in my opinion. Well, that, it gets the conversation started. So that is an overview, right? And an overview. It's not huge detail example, but that's how you could come up with an offer. If you're an agent representing a buyer and they're like, what should I write on this offer on this house? Or sometimes you might even get a house that's not on the market and you really want to, they always, Anna could probably say, they always want you to say the price, right?
Yep.
So this is where you can kind of come in and you can do the rule of thumb, the 75% rule. And then you can also do a more in-depth analysis through the bigger pockets.
Yes. And I will say, as an agent with this tool and the next tool that we're going to show, I absolutely encourage you to go in, even if you don't have an investor right now or have a property that you're interested in, like go in your MLS, pick a property, use the calculator. All of these calculators, I will say, I think for the most part, for your pockets ones, has like a little hyperlink next to each of the boxes that kind of tell you what it is.
Yes.
And so just keep practicing, keep learning. And like I always say, surround yourself with other investors, because then if there's parts where you don't completely understand part of the calculator, that's where having a community around you of people that do can like walk you through, but you're not going in cold because you've already done some playing around with the calculator, trying to understand what goes into these calculations. Just
Yeah,
saying.
100%. I mean, we give homework at our Cash Flow Breakfast Club to just do deal analysis, right? Get
Mhm.
familiar with it. Continue looking at the market that you're actually interested in buying, and see what homes are selling for. And then if they are flips, what they're reselling for. Because that way, you can familiarize yourself with the numbers. And when a deal does come your way, you do a quick back of the envelope math and say, okay, this makes sense. Let's get this home under contract. So
Yeah.
cool. And so we're going to kind of flip. That was the construction, the fix and flip side, but we know not all investors are into that, right? Some investors are just, they want to get into real estate to build that nest egg for the future, right? So same question, another rule of thumb, what is the 1% rule and how do you use it as like a quick gut check for if a deal makes sense?
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and share my screen first, and then I'll explain why, and we'll do the whole 1% rule thing. All right, so you can see that.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then Deal Check is also a free tool up to a certain number of properties. And then you can pay for a subscription if you want to be able to analyze more properties or get a little bit more detailed calculations. But otherwise, you just keep deleting properties. I think you can have up to like 9 or 10. So that's super cool. But before I jump in, we're going to talk about the 1% rule. And I should have cleared my filters. I was in here earlier. So Brian and I invest in Danville. So the cool part about Deal Check, you can either find properties like Nico was talking about for fix and flips in the MLS or through a wholesaler or whatever it may be. Or if you're in Deal Check proper, they actually have like a search for properties. You can type in the area that you're looking for. You can put in specifications as far as like what types of properties you're looking for. And then if you scroll down, it gives you a list of properties. And so the 1% rule essentially says when you get a list of properties, if you know that you can earn 1% of the total cost paid for that property in rent, that is a property you may want to take a look at. So if you bought a property all in for $100,000 and you can rent it for $1,000 a month, then that property is one that you want to do your calculations on, because there's a good chance that it's going to cash flow. I will say it's become a lot harder to get the 1% rule or over the 1% rule in recent years with interest rates. So some people are willing to go a little less and maybe not get as much cash out of the deal, or maybe they're willing to break even for like appreciation and other stuff. But essentially, that's just a quick rule of thumb, just like the 75% rule, that if you've got a long list of properties, how do I figure out which ones I want to look at first and maybe an actual good deal as far as a buy and hold property?
So, Anna, can I pause you on that? So
Of
we brought,
course.
and so we're talking as agents, we're also talking as investors, right? So when would you, we talk about the different type of investors that we would work
Mhm.
with, right? When would you use like a 1% rule versus a 75% rule? Like what would you, what type of client or investor are you talking about?
I mean, I think like well, it's funny because the 75% rule, I feel like there's different iterations of that. So as like you were using it, it's someone which is probably something that we probably encounter more in our markets because our markets are high ticket items. So it's actually quite hard to cash flow in our like buy and hold and cash flow in our market. So people that are doing fix and flips and looking to basically make a quick profit is where the 75% rule comes in the way that you described it. I will also say that Brian and I use a 75% rule, very similar in like how you calculate it, like you did, but we do it for the reason of we're going to buy and hold it. And there's a good chance we're going to refinance this property. And usually, when you refinance a property for rental properties, the lender usually gives you about between 70 and 80% is what they're willing to loan you on the property value. So we use the 75% rule a little bit differently, but it's from that perspective. If it's an investor that wants to hold the property and refinance it. And then the 1% rule, I use it more so at the very beginning phases for us is like we get a long list of properties. Maybe a wholesaler gives you a list of like 20 properties. And we just want to figure out like, I don't want to spend all day analyzing every single property. So let me see which ones come close to the 1% rule and do the analysis on those first.
Got it. So it's more of a cash flow play, right? Instead of
Yes.
the equity, right? You're looking to buy the properties where, all your expenses all in are 1,000, maybe you're getting $1,200,
Yes.
$1,300, and you're essentially getting cash flow, right?
Correct. Yes. Oh, that's what you meant.
I was trying to tee it up.
I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I use it in different ways. But yes, essentially the 75% rule is more for buy and hold or not buy and hold for fix and flips. And maybe some folks that are looking to push appreciation plays and then cash out and keep rolling that money into other projects. That's a different kind of investing. But yes, 1% rule is for people that are looking for cash flow.
Got it. All right. Sorry to
Okay.
derail you.
No, it's okay. I didn't know what you were asking me. I was like, this long-winded answer. And you're like, so it's for cash flow. And I'm like, yes. So I chose Danville, is the market that you see here. And I was looking through some of the properties. And the cool part, you can either enter in your own property if you have it here, or like I said, you can do the search. And so I said, let me do the search just for giggles. You can put in dollar amount. I put in for me because I was trying to achieve as close to the 1% rule as possible. I put 150K as the max price. I put single family home, and then I put a filter of about 3.2. I will say all of this does require some research. I will say probably on Nico's end too with fix and flips. Like you can plug in any number, but it's like AI, it's, trash in, trash out. So you do have to do some research in these different areas. So I know for this particular area, because we invest there, that a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, depending on where it's located in this town and the condition of it, you might be able to get 14 to 1500 a month. So that's why I put the 150K as like the max threshold just to see what they had out there. I put the 3 bedrooms. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So you're saying that in 2026 in April, you can still buy single family homes under 150K. You heard it
Yes.
here. You heard it here.
Yes, you can, depending on where you are, unless you want to live in like the DMV. And then absolutely not, because you're going to be living, you can buy the like, what is it? Like the cardboard box under the bridge.
Yeah, for 300,000.
So yes, there are still pockets of that in different parts of the country. This is where, and we'll do another episode about this too. If you guys want to hear about it, actually, you should hear about it, is like choosing a market and understanding what like, factors go into choosing a market, like population growth, economic growth, things like that. So in this particular area, we know that there's economic growth based on businesses coming in and some investments in this area. And we know roughly what the rental rates are. So that's why I chose the filters this way. And then I did a search and I went through and it gave me a list of a couple different properties. And I also like the map because when I look at the map, then I can like actually see where these properties are. And I know Danville well enough at this point where I can kind of guesstimate where I could get that $1,400 to $1,500 a month in rent. So I chose properties in certain areas for that. So I'm going to take you to the main page because I already had one selected. This is our main page. And even with Deal Check, you can do different kinds of calculators. But today we're focusing just on buy and hold rentals. We have some other projects in here that we've clearly looked at before. But I was looking at 145 Shady Lane. That's
Shady.
interesting. I know. There's a story that was going on before we got on camera, and I'm like, wait a minute.
That just means now we have to buy this property, right?
I was like, wait a minute. There is like a theme here. So
that's the theme of this Friday's episode.
Theme of this Friday's episode. So when you select one of the properties that are found in the search in Deal Check, it does auto-populate a lot of the information directly from the listing that's in there. So all of these factors are things that you can edit and adjust. So you can click into the property description. You can add any tags, labels, type of property. If you know that like, oh, it says it's a 3-2, but it's really a 4-2, you can adjust those kinds of numbers here. Then there's the purchase worksheet. And so this one, I think, how long does it say on here, how long it's been on the market? I think this is one that's been on the market for several days when I was looking at the properties searching. Sorry, I'm not trying to make you motion sick by going back and forth to see if it said, because several of these have been on for a while. And I think if you see it, Nico, you have to tell me. Oh, there it is. So it's been on 172 days.
Okay.
So
stale listing like we were talking about before. So are
correct.
These, Anna, sorry, are these on the market or are they just on the Deal Check marketplace?
These are on the market.
Okay.
These are on like the MLS. Okay. On the MLS at the time. So these, I mean, so if you did have an off-market deal, again, with Deal Check, you can manually enter in the information. It will pull in some public data, but you can manually enter addresses that are not on the market and then do the same type of deal analysis on it. So we know Shady Lane's been on the market for several days, for at least over 100. And their asking price right now is $124,900, which is interesting. You can flip through the pictures. And similar to like, this is one of those where if you have to upgrade to get more pictures or just go on Zillow, this is probably where I would go on Zillow and find like the listing on Zillow and pull up the rest of the pictures for the interior. It looked like it wasn't in bad condition. And I will say when you're looking to buy a property to buy and hold as a rental, you do look at slightly different things than you would, I think, as a fix and flip, because you're not necessarily doing the remodeling up to the standards as if you were going to sell it retail. You're making it nice, safe, clean, and habitable for renters to move in if you're keeping it as a buy and hold. So there's probably a little less renovation costs, or the quality of the material may be a little bit different than I would put into a fix and flip. Would you agree with that?
I agree 100%. Most of the time, if you're a buy and hold investor, unless you're getting advanced like Anna and I doing BRRRRs, you're looking to get these properties that are usually rent ready or maybe need a little bit of cosmetic work. So you're okay with putting a bigger down payment and things like that because you want to get it rented ASAP. Like sometimes even the day of when you actually close, you get a tenant in there so that you can offset your mortgage. So yes, I agree. You look at them a little bit differently.
Yeah. So let me go through this real quick because I feel like it's to some extent Deal Check kind of goes a little more in depth than maybe the Bigger Pockets calculator does. And this is kind of the stuff that we would go into in a future episode when we're doing more of like level, like, I don't know, calculators 201 versus 101. So purchase price, we just talked about that. It's been on the market for a while. You have the ability to change this. So maybe you're like, you know what, 124,900 is clearly overpriced. I would pay less. I think I would actually pay 100,000 or 100 for this one. And so that tweaks all your calculations. So you're able to go in and make these changes. The ARV, Nico talked about that. That comes into consideration here too. Like I was saying, if you're going to keep it, but maybe you want to refinance it. Like us, for instance, we have a HELOC on our primary residence, which we've used to essentially pay cash and fund projects. But we want to pay that HELOC back at some point and continue to use that money. So we want to know what the ARV is to see how much we could potentially pull back out of that property when we put financing against that specific property and then put it back into the HELOC. So this ARV is also important. Talk to an agent, research because this gives you an S. Oh, go ahead.
Would you say that the ARV is probably the most important number for either one of these when you're trying to calculate whether a deal makes sense or not?
I I think ARV is one of them. I think the other number that's very important, I think in either case, based on the condition of the property, is the rehab costs. Because you could buy a property and if rehab costs, blow up and it's significantly more than you thought, I mean, it doesn't matter what the ARV is, it can totally crap a deal out. Like it could totally scratch a deal out.
Yeah, especially with, tariffs and everything, material costs have gone up as well. So I agree. Those two in tandem for sure.
Yes. So I don't know. What do you think? Like, do you think like ARV is the most important number?
I would say 1A and 1B. So after repair value, because it kind of you reverse engineer your offers from the ARV. So I think it's definitely there. And you want to spend some time trying to figure that out or work with an agent that, is investor friendly and understands how to calculate a ARV.
Yeah.
And then, yes, and then rehab costs, maybe putting a 10, sometimes 20% buffer,
Mhm.
depending on, if you're doing a major rehab and you're tearing
Yeah.
up walls. I know I just experienced that and went a little over budget on one of my rehabs. So understanding that is definitely important.
Yeah. I think the ARV too, in my opinion, is a little bit more significant if you're doing a fix and flip because you were looking to make a cash profit to get rid of that house and pay off private money lenders or whatever you have going on. Usually, if you're buying and holding, sometimes you get a little bit longer of a financing term if you're paying cash or if you're doing like some kind of loan. But the worst that can happen is if your ARV is off and you are going to refinance this property, is you're going to leave more money in the deal. I think it's a little riskier when you're trying to do a fix and flip and you're like, these are my margins. I have to pay these people back. Otherwise, I end up with nothing. With the ARV that's slightly off on a buy and hold, you still at least have a house.
100%.
So that's my two
So
cents.
talk to us about the financing. Usually you're putting what, like 20, 30% down as an investor, right?
Yeah, if you're using, I'll say what they like commercial or loan type product, like real estate investing type loan products, they usually ask for 20 to 30% down. It's not the same as when you're like buying a home for yourself and you're using like an FHA loan or something like that, where it's like 3% down or a VA
Hmm.
loan that's 0% down. So you want to take into account that you're going to need at least 20% down. Um, for the property. And then this is where the calculator, like there's so many different ways to like use this. There's tutorial, but then you can go in, you can put in like the loan label, like what type of loan is it? So you know, okay, this is a 30-year DSCR loan, whatever that may look like. Um, and then your financing, you can choose whether you want to purchase, whether you want to finance off of the purchase price, rehab costs, ARV, or a custom amount.
Yeah.
Someone may do both or like price and rehab costs. Or maybe they want, I don't know. I don't know when you would do a custom amount. I feel like this is more of a fix and flip.
Hmm.
But you can choose what you want to base the financing off, how much of a down payment you want to put down, if how you want to amortize it, if you want to do interest only, because in some cases, like you can, like our HELOC is interest only payment. You may be borrowing money from a private money lender and they may do interest only payments.
Hmm.
I don't know, or how far they want to amortize that over your interest rate, the loan of the term of the loan, if you're going to need PMI or not. In most cases, I don't know if I've ever had to do we. This is a question for Nico. Have you? I don't know that I've ever had to get PMI on a rental property.
No, because like you said, you're usually putting at least 20% down. So PMI comes into a factor. For those who don't know what PMI is, private mortgage insurance. So anytime you're putting under 20%, so if you're putting 5% down, like most first time home buyers, or 3% down, you have a PMI, unless you're a VA buyer, but you have PMI.
Yeah.
So it's basically the mortgage insurance, the mortgage company saying, hey, there's insurance just in case you were to default, you're paying extra monthly. So to answer your question, no, it's not super common when you're buying investment properties because you're putting
Okay.
at
That's
least
why I was
20%
like,
down.
huh. Okay. Yeah. So you can add another loan because in some cases, maybe you're getting like a loan from like a hard money lender, but then maybe you're getting a partial loan from a seller financer type deal, or you're getting a private money loan and a hard money loan. So you can add the different type of loan types when you're doing the calculations. Purchase costs, rehab costs. I'm not going to go super in depth into this. Um, Rental income. The cool thing about Deal Check is that it does give you comps, but I again encourage you to go actually look at those comps to kind of do your own research or have an agent pull them for you. Because it is AI generated. It does pull it from like public information, but like anything, it can make mistakes and you have to make sure that you are comfortable with this. Because this could be pulling a comp that's like brand spanking new, totally refinished, everything is brand new, bells and whistles, but like maybe my property isn't going to look like that. So maybe I would get 12 something for it instead of 1430 for it.
Yeah. So this number specifically, you definitely want to know if you're buying a rental property, right? So
Yes.
I use a site called Rentometer. You can also go on the MLS to look at things like that, or
Yeah.
you can use, what Anna was talking about, like AI and things like that. But you definitely want to verify and make sure, or property managers in the area, they know what rents go for.
Correct. And we use Rentcast, which is like Rentometer. But Rentcast is another free application that you can use to pull rental comp numbers. And it gives you the rental comps, but just like this one, it gives you the listings. But I still encourage you to like go look at the pictures, make sure it's a true comp. Kind of like Nico did earlier, where he like this one is actually the closest comp because he looked at the pictures to compare. Um, so we do include there's buffers for including pretty much everything, like cost overruns on the rehab, vacancy rate. Some people like when you finish your house and you're ready to put it on the market, it's not going to go under, you're not going to have a tenant moving in day one unless you're super duper lucky. And then once that tenant moves out, there's usually some turnover time that's required. You may need to paint, you may need to make some repairs, and it may take a month or two to get a new tenant in there. So vacancy rate, you want to take into account a lot of this stuff. I won't go into details, but operating expenses, you want to take that into account. That's like property management fees, if there's any tenant or landlord paid utilities. And then this also does the long-term projections. Like if you're in an area that you think has appreciation, income growth, expense increases, like this calculator kind of goes through every single possible thing that you could think of when it comes to that. So you put all of this in, and then you can actually look at projections, and it actually gives you projections assuming certain things like 3% appreciation, but year one all the way to year 30. And it kind of gives you an idea of what type of income you can have coming in. We didn't put anything for property taxes, costs for different operating expenses, cash flow, what the cash flow can look like over time, tax benefits and deductions over time, because there's a section we didn't go over that talks about like depreciations and things like that. So that's another, we actually, I think we have an episode that may have talked about depreciation at some point.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Yes. So this is, I will say Deal Check is probably a little bit more of an in-depth calculator. But if you go in here and just slowly go through each of the different sections, check have the little question marks. If you float over the little question marks, it actually tells you what these different calculations mean, what they're for. This is a fantastic tool to go in. One, to use as a calculator. We verified it with our paper spreadsheet that we use, that these numbers are accurate. But it also can walk you through almost like a tutorial of like, how do you underwrite a deal for buy and hold? And so, like I said, it's got all kinds of charts and stuff. I love this.
So I just want to chime in. I also love this because as a buy and hold investor, you're buying a property to, hopefully hold on to it forever, right? And it's different from a fix and flip because you're reselling it. But this, you really need to know what it looks like in 5, 10 years, 20 years. I like that you're able to put appreciation, what are homes appreciating in this market, whether it's 2%, 5%, and what it would look like in year 30, because it really kind of gives you a bigger picture. Okay, if I hold on to this property for 10 years and I budget, enough money for expenses, operating expenses and things like that, not only can I cash flow, but I can also, build my equity through renters paying my mortgage and things like that. So this projections tab and this Deal Check calculator is essential. It's awesome that you can look into that far in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's an amazing tool. The other thing I will say, similar to the Bigger Pockets calculator, you can actually export these reports. So let's say you're going in with a partner and you're like, hey, I have this really good deal, or even that private money lender that you're trying to get money from to at least get this deal rolling before you cash out and pay them off, whatever that looks like. You can export these reports and you can also share them with your clients. with your private money lenders, with whoever it is that you are trying to do this deal with. So that way they can see where your numbers and calculations came from. So this is another tool. And like I said, these are free tools that you're able to create an account, go in and start using like today.
Love it. Um, so we are running close on time, but if
Yep.
somebody were looking at their very first potential investment property this week, what are 3 numbers that they need to know before making any decision? I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what are three things
What
that
are
they need to?
3 things that they need to look at? So we're not talking rules of thumb, right? We're talking about like what numbers. So
Yeah,
So this is well, it depends on what their goals are, but I would say ARV for sure, the
yeah,
after, or with well, I guess it's up what you can buy it for, like what the sales cost is, what the renovation costs are, what the after repair value is. I can go into different numbers, but I feel like if you're just starting out, like the first thing you need to do is be able to kind of guesstimate like how much it's going to cost to fix up the property, figure out what you think the property is going to be worth, and then back into that number of what would you be willing to pay for that property.
yeah. No, 100%. ARV, rehab costs. If you're doing a rental rate, how much it's going for, and how long it takes to actually get it rented, or how long it takes to actually resell the property. Those are things that you would want to know.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we have some pretty good resources that these 2 calculators are fantastic resources. We'll try to put them in the show notes so you can so you can save them and play with them. But if you could pick one other resource that you would like tell people to bookmark right now, what would it be?
Oh, the resource would be the Cashflow Breakfast Club, our local meetups. So because we do these, and we actually don't do that calculator, we do it by hand. So you really understand the numbers. So I encourage you to, if you're in our area, of course, come to our meetups, but do go to other local meetups where they're doing deal analysis. I like to nerd out a little bit about these things. But yes, Deal Check and Bigger Pockets calculators are great tools, free tools.
Okay, I agree. And I don't know if you knew this actually, if you sign up for an account at the Cashflow Breakfast Club website, they do have the spreadsheets that you can download, but they actually have calculators that you can use there too. Just saying. And then I encourage you to try the different calculators because I feel like the different styles and the way that it shows information caters to different people. So find the one that works for you that you can use. What is it? It's like a CRM for for the agents on here. The best one is the one that you're going to use.
100%. So this is a really good question. So what is the biggest lie that people tell themselves when trying to convince themselves whether a deal is a good deal or a bad deal?
Oh my God. Probably I can do it for cheaper. I don't need a property manager. I can cut out these costs here and here. I can tweak the numbers and take this out and take that out because I can make it work if I just take these couple of numbers out. And then they force the numbers to work and then they become a slave to the property because it either goes over cost. They didn't take into account property management fees because it doesn't work if you don't, like if you include property management fees. So I will say that's probably the biggest lie is when someone thinks it's so close. If I just cut these things out, the deal will work and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why we calculate with all of these numbers in mind.
Yeah. Real estate is emotional. It is. I
Mhm.
mean, it's black and white. It really is emotional. And if you've been working with an off market deal and you're like, oh, I finally answered my
Uh-huh.
call. Oh, yeah, but the number, we're a little bit off, but I think I can make it work if, with $10,000 more going to the seller.
Mhm.
You really have to be careful when you're doing this rehab, especially if you're doing the fix and flips. You want to give yourself a margin. You never know. When we were doing our rehab, I didn't know that all these crazy tariffs and things like that were going to affect material costs. Now I probably could have, but long story short, investors maybe try and force the deal to work where the numbers are showing you're doing all these buy and holds and you think you can get rent for 2,000 where your property manager is saying, hey, 1,500 is pushing it. And you try and force the deal. So really is trying to stick to your numbers. And, maybe that takes writing 10, 20, 30 offers for you to get that one for it to make sense.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. All right, Nico. So what's the first deal you wish you had analyzed better? And what did you learn from that deal?
Let's see. I wish I had a really good answer for this, but our first deal, I didn't even really understand any of this, like rehab. I didn't know about calculators. It was before I even went to my first cash flow breakfast club. So all I knew is that we were able to buy it way below what I believed was the market value at the time. It needed a little bit of work. So I didn't do the calculator where I'm rehabbing costs and ARV. I didn't know any of that. I just knew that I was able to buy it at a price. So sometimes, you might stumble a newer investor or an agent that's trying to understand this. You might stumble across a deal that makes sense for you. So I guess that's not the best answer, but it taught me to kind of, what is it? Fail forward, right? I don't think of it as a failure, but looking back, I would have done a few different things differently than what I did at the time. But we talk about this all the time. The 0 to 1 is the hardest, right? To get that first rental property. We know tons of people that do the analysis paralysis, and they're like, "Oh, I'll do all these spreadsheets," which is great. You want to, but they never actually put out an offer. You're never going to get a house if you don't put out an offer. Um, so just kind of understanding that, and eventually house 2, house 3, you're getting familiar with the terminology, you're getting in communities where people are making tons of offers and kind of understanding it. That's really where you learn the most, in my opinion. And I can only talk about my experience. I don't
I
know. What
love
about
that.
you?
Oh boy. I always talk about this one property, but I don't know if I should talk about it because I'm trying to sell it. Well,
Yeah. Right.
um, I guess I will say yes. It wasn't our first deal, but similar to you, like I think we knew enough to be dangerous. We got lucky with our first couple deals, some single family homes, and they've worked out just fine. They've penciled out just fine. On the 4 units building that I have referred to in past episodes, on paper, like on the quick back of the envelope math, did look really good. And that was based off of somebody at the time who we had as a property manager that was like, oh, you can get this much for rent per month. So we did the analysis on that when our agent friend who lives in the area and had helped us buy previous properties was like, that seems really high. I think you can only get X. And we were like, oh, but we like her numbers so much. And
That's that
so
emotional side, right? You're
that's
like,
that emotional side.
yeah, you try and
And
force the numbers.
so I think we did try to force the numbers a little bit. I think we got caught up in the moment and didn't really have someone go in and it worked like a rehab this property, but didn't have someone truly go in and do a really good job of inspecting the property to see like what kinds of things we might need to take into account into the future. Like there's some pretty there's at least one or two like fairly large capex expenses that we just didn't take into account. And as much as this property should cash flow and be like a rock star on paper, some of the capex expenses just have wiped out the cash flow on it. And so we just didn't do a really good job analyzing it. I think we did a series. It was like everything you could do wrong. Like we didn't take into account large capex expenses, capital expenditures. We like went with the higher number because it sounded better. And it's not necessarily analyzing the numbers per se, but we probably should have analyzed the neighborhood a little bit better because it's definitely not in a appreciating path of progress kind of neighborhood. I mean, I don't know, maybe in like 20 years. So that's probably the first deal that we've had that I'm like, man, like looking back on it, I was like, probably should have done a better job at analyzing that deal.
But you live and learn, right? And I think
Yep.
you and Brian have the right attitude, right? You think of it more of like, all right, this is a lesson. And when we buy our next property, we're going to look at these things, talk to different property managers.
Mhm.
This is all on hindsight from our couple years
Yep.
of being in the business. So it's one of those things that it's the growing pains, I like to say, that you have to go through as an investor.
Oh, absolutely. I used to say, like, if I could go back, I wouldn't do XYZ, but I think you might have been at one of the meetups where I said, you know what, I could take that back. I actually retract that statement because I've learned so much that I can share with other people and that have helped me put processes in place now, which served me that I don't know that I would have put in place had I not gone through those experiences. I would have learned it down the road the hard way, some other way, if I hadn't learned it with this property. So I don't regret it. It sucks, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. And that's going to do it for another episode. We have these calculators, these free calculators, but reach out to Anna and I if you ever want to do some deal analysis. I really love nerding out about this kind of stuff, especially if it's here in my market. So please reach out to me at N Garcia Official on all social platforms. And you can reach out to Anna at
I'm Anna_Bialik realtor on Instagram. Actually, I'm Anna Bialik realtor pretty much everywhere because I've changed it. So that's where you can find me. And I challenge you, if you're listening to this, go download one of these calculators or go log on to the website, set up an account, go find a deal, whatever it is, and just start punching in the numbers. Go start analyzing your first deal and learning to understand what they mean.
That's right. All right, guys. We'll tune into the next one.
All right. Bye.